is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece, episodes 549 through 551. A rift opens up, Luffy versus Jinbei. Something has happened to Hordy, the true power of the evil drug. And the battle is on at Concord Plaza. In these episodes, Jinbei gives some reasons for keeping Luffy out of the fight that, I guess makes sense, but I don't know, y'all. I really don't know if I think that what would happen if Luffy got involved is the same as Jinbei's. Welcome to take feedback on that. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Michael for commissioning this episode. What's up, Michael? If you're out there, appreciate you. Y'all, these episodes are full of surprises. I really thought I kind of knew how certain things were going to shake out, and they don't go that way at all. So the first thing that I want to talk about is Jinbei versus Luffy. The thing that you guys know, last episode was sort of how can the two of them waste their time and energy on fighting each other when they have a real enemy with the sort of time limit going on to deal with? And the answer to that is Jinbei thinks that if Luffy gets involved, because Luffy is human, it's going to look bad and it's going to reinforce all of the terrible things that the fishmen of this island already have started to think about humans. He's basically we were finally able to collect enough signatures and you come out swinging even though it's at somebody who seems an enemy right now, and you are going to make them all kind of second guess signing it and want to take it back. Now, y'all, I am so conflicted on this. It's the sort of thing that I feel on the one hand, I understand what he means. It's just extremely difficult for me to understand how, when this man is holding the king hostage ready for execution, they wouldn't see Luffy as a hero. I just don't really buy that. I especially because Luffy and his friends have already met the king and they have already met the princess, who knows they think well of them for the most part. So you would have not only the fact that he saved the king, but then the actual king of this island telling everybody, I invited him to the palace because I considered him an honored guest and he saved my life. I feel like that's just that's just done. It's problem solved, Florian says, I love how you are a lot. I don't know what to think. I felt the same. However, some of the fandom found this arc had too much race stuff in it. It's funny because, how can it have too much when that's the point of all of the story? I guess if you're saying, we shouldn't pursue this storyline at all, which I'm assuming is what they mean by that. But that feels incredibly short-sighted to me. That feels like you set this all up with Arlong and his hatred of humans long ago. People just didn't want a payoff on that. They didn't want to find... What about the previous arc, Florian? Because, even though it winds up becoming about the War of the Best, it all starts because of selling slaves and with an exclusive, like, zeroing in on the mermaids and the mermen and what happened to them. So, like, genuinely, I really don't know what people are hoping for if this isn't, like, I feel like you're missing the point of some things then. How are they supposed to deal with a race-based slavery system? And I guess it's unfair to call it completely race-based because humans are being sold as slaves as well, but it was much more geared towards mermaids and mermen because they are a sort of... I was going to say like a luxury item, and then I went to restrain myself, but you know what? I think that's accurate, so I'm going to go ahead and say that. I just don't really feel like you can make that argument here and also know what the fuck you're talking about with the whole rest of the plot. Florian says, yeah, I feel like those are the people who are only here for the fights and don't see the overall story. Yeah. Look, I know I bring up Cradle a lot, and I do not apologize for that. If you haven't read the Cradle series and you are into One Piece, you're gonna like it. Go do that. But there was a hot take that somebody shared from Reddit a couple of days ago in the Discord. And it was somebody who read a certain book from the series, a Cradle book, and they got really angry that the main character loses a bunch of fights in this particular book. And they basically acted as if it were an assassination of the character, that it was a waste of time to read it because he just gets beaten so often that it's like demoralizing. They completely sidestepped all of the incredible character development that happened and the strategic losses that this character knew were going to happen and decided to engage with because they were keeping their eyes on the big picture. There was just so much about that book that, in my opinion, made it one of the best in the series. And this person was just unwilling to see any of that. And I was kind of gratified when they got roundly dunked on by everybody on Reddit who was just like, are you 12 years old? Like, what do you mean? You know? And I can't help but feel that way about this as well. If you feel like there's too much race stuff in this storyline, what are you wanting them to fight for? What bothers you about this then? It feels for me like it's just, I don't want anything that parallels the real world's problems because that's too heavy. And there's a lot of stuff that's kind of heavy in this show, like intermittently. I don't know. I just feel like that's a weird position to take. So, yeah, I feel like, honestly, that just within this opening, I covered essentially everything that happens in the first of these 3 episodes. That's not true, but the thing that they did here, which is just always frustrating, they had Jinbei take absolute ages to get to the point about why he doesn't want Luffy to engage in the fight. So it's really frustrating because, like, it's the sort of thing that I know that this is them sort of stretching things out. They're trying to fill time, I guess. But the last episode ends with Jinbei just being like, you're not going to get involved, and cracking his knuckles and standing in front of Luffy in a way that just felt very much like he was being obstinate for the sake of it. And it's not until like halfway through this episode that we actually get an answer about why he feels that way. I didn't even know that there was a further, like, thesis behind why. I thought he was only concerned about the fact that Luffy wasn't going to be able to hold his own in the fight, that he was of the opinion that, like, you're going in there thinking that you're more capable against this guy than you are because you don't understand what the drug that he is using and how that affects things. And so I thought it was him maybe underestimating Luffy. Maybe it was like, maybe he is right and I haven't seen everything that the drug can do yet. You know, there's all kinds of... The fact that it turns out to be part of the race issue, like I said, I appreciate that we're doing this because the show is trying to keep things sort of consistent and a little bit complicated. And I don't really mind that. I you know what I mean? But it just, for me, feels like all of the context surrounding how our friends got here, to me, would just erase any concerns that he has about how this would go. They have the approval of the royals. I really think that's all you need. This would immediately clear things up with the princes, and the princes were the only ones that were sort of suspicious of the Straw Hats, thinking they were taking these mermaids prisoner. And even them, in these episodes, they eventually have a chat amongst themselves about how they don't seem like bad people, actually. And maybe there's just been a sort of misunderstanding. There's just a lot of people who are having the backs of the Straw Hats here, and I don't know if Jinbei is just unaware of that. If, you know, because he wasn't with them. He's just been chilling here in the Sea Forest until they came to meet him. I don't really know how much he knows about what's gone down with all of them. But it just, to me, was sort of like, you just are assuming a lot here. And if you see that Luffy's got the princess with him, and she seems to be on good terms with him. She came willingly. She wanted to do this. And seems to have, like, some genuine affection for him. I feel like that should be evidence enough, even though he wasn't with them. You know what I'm saying? It just... I don't know, guys. I'm just sort of frustrated by this because it's like... It just feels like we're doing something to delay it all. Just because we need to draw it all out, even though it doesn't really make sense or feel organic, etc., etc. So yeah, I'm struggling with this a little bit, and it's fine. That's going to happen. So let's talk about all of our guys that are still in the cage: Usopp, Brook, and Zoro. And this is so strange, you guys. I really kind of expected, and, you know, maybe this is my fault. I really kind of expected our guys to, like, have come up with some plan by now. To have, like, thought it through, maybe, you know, and eventually Brook does something. But in usual fashion for this show, and when I say this, I say it with the utmost affection, really. The usual fashion for me is that somebody does something incredibly bonkers out of nowhere, and then they, like, explain it later. And we don't even... The explanation is insufficient, but I'm going to jump into what that is, because our guys are just sort of, like, waiting for Zoro to come up with a plan, who's like, if I only had a sword, then everything would be fine. I couldn't help but laugh because Usopp's response to that is just, I don't think that's true. Honestly, that really did make me LOL, because he's right and Zoro is wrong, and that's just that on that. And finally, Brooke says, well, since our outlook is so bleak, I didn't want to do this in front of you, but I guess I have to. And he begins chanting. Now, I wasn't watching this with the subtitles on when I first watched it. I have them on now, and it's not like the subtitles that are the Japanese translation subtitles. This is the actual dub subtitles. The dub titles, if you will. And it says that he is just chanting bone, bone, bone over and over again, which is hilarious, just objectively very funny. But in the audio, it doesn't sound like that's what he's saying. It sounds more like a drum beating. I knew it was him vocalizing, but it felt like there was almost an effect put on his voice. It was really, really cool sounding, actually. I was sort of taken aback by how neat this was. And as he is saying this, and I'm like watching this happen, thinking to myself, what? All of a sudden, this like green mist begins to come out of his mouth, and a like skull shape appears with a sort of, it's like the skull has a defined edge to it, but it's in a cloud of green that sort of suggests Brooke's afro a little bit. And it just turns and talks to them and says, "And I'm out." And by the way, there's like a few other green sort of flaming, it's like they're taking the shape of flames, but they look like smoke. And those are sort of hovering around him. I don't know if that's meant to imply that there is some sort of weapon that he can use with this. You know what I'm saying? But I was just really, I couldn't help but LOL at this, because as he does this, both his friends, like, he just says, "I don't want to do this in front of you." He doesn't explain or warn them or anything. And then when he does this and just turns back, of course, his friends scream, as they should. And Usopp says, "When did you learn to do that?" In the softest voice. I couldn't tell if this is supposed to be Brooke being genuinely curious what Usopp's asking, or if it was supposed to be Brooke is being really coy about this incredibly boss weapon that he now has. Ability, if you don't want to call it a weapon, I suppose. But he just says, "Do what? You mean make my soul leave my body?" In this like very soft voice that Brooke is such a weirdo, you guys. I kind of live for him as a character if it weren't for what he says next. You knew that was coming, right? Yeah, my guys, because then he immediately has to be like, well, if there's something that, like, a way for men to do this, you know that there's only one thing they're going to go looking for. Why must we do this, y'all? I just want to know why we have to. It's such a shame to me. Genuinely, like, it just throws cold water on everything every time it happens. The one, like, thing I will say about all, he doesn't get specific here. He just says you just go looking for one thing. It's very clear what he means by that, but I will say at least it doesn't get specific. And we also get a lot less of Sanji the Hornball in these episodes as well. I have no doubt that will resurface. But as of right now, it was pretty restrained. Sanji doesn't have a lot to do in these episodes except like sort of make an explanation about why Luffy should be allowed to do what he wants, essentially. So I'll give, I don't even want to say I'll give credit on that. More like I just found that to at least be a relief. But, yeah, y'all, this was just, you know, it's just so, it just comes in and ruins these moments that are awesome otherwise. So Brooke says it's a new trick. I was surprised. And he says, like, it happened quite suddenly because I had fallen into a slump. And we find out that his sales, like all of them, the tickets and his music, they were all on the decline. And we get to see a bunch of people talking about how, like, his concert wasn't that good, how they actually prefer his own music, and other people are being like, I just don't feel his soul anymore. And I was like, huh, interesting. And we get his manager threatening him, saying, you better pull it together or I'm cutting you off. Basically, like, I won't manage you anymore. I have to admit, what does the manager do except just take some of Brooks's money? Like, I kind of felt like Brooke probably should be on his own. Like, just, you could do better, I have no doubt, than the men who were about to enslave you and have 2 elbows, like, on each arm. But Brooke is like, well, dude, I can't just, like, throw music together. And I had to laugh at that because, like, hundreds of chart toppers beg to differ. But he says, let me write one last good song. Please, God of music, bless me. And he's fallen to his knees and he's in this shaft of light with his hands clasped in front of him. And he says, all who hear it to their souls, in a weird, like, turn of phrase that I wasn't really sure. I'm going to rewind and see if that was, grant me a melody. Ah, that's right. Here it is. I beg of you, let me write one last good song. A melody that that will shake everyone who hear it to their souls. We have the sky open, and there's like a rainbow sort of galaxy look. Brooke begins to sort of choke, and then his soul just flies out, and he has no idea what's going on. Can you imagine? I have got to say, everybody on our team has their very unique sets of skills and abilities, and they all have their, like, learning curves with figuring out how to use them. But I feel like Brooke has gotten kind of the hardest hoe to row to hoe. You know what I'm saying? I just feel like, in terms of his overall ability, being like, oh yeah, I'm still alive in a skeleton body, that's incredibly difficult to get used to, and something that's going to take a lot of time and isolate you from a lot of people just based on how you look now, because a lot of the gum fruits don't really affect your exterior. You can, like, begin to wear stuff that sort of reflects what you can do as accessories, but it's not like it's immediately apparent with a lot of people that they've eaten one. And I just feel like the weirdness of Brooke's existence, and having been all alone on that boat for so long, and then this kind of weirdo shit that's so esoteric, I'm just like, man, I feel like he's on hard mode. And he says it was frightening at first, but it really helped. With this new ability came an epiphany. I finally realized what was missing from my music and how to get out of my slump. And when Zoro says which was, this is when his nose starts bleeding. And he says it's actually pretty obvious when you think about it. If a man can go anywhere undetected, there's one thing he's going to go looking for. So, I don't even understand what he means by this. Is he saying that, like, the thing that was missing from my music was objectifying women without their knowledge? And so I just inserted a bunch of lyrics about how sexy naked women are, and that became good music all of a sudden? I don't even get what he's saying here, you guys. What does that mean? I feel like I feel like it comes across as if I'm being purposely obtuse. And I really want to, I'm not trying to be difficult here. I really genuinely do not understand. I feel like there's an implication that I'm supposed to get, but the whole thing has been done in such a roundabout way. And or if it's supposed to be that seeing naked women inspired his music, and it wasn't a direct, that was what was missing, but more once I got horny, the soul came back into my music again. Is that it? Which is just really really strange. And unfortunately, the most unfortunate part of this, because we already know Brooke is a pervert and a creep. And I've kind of tried to come to terms with that. It hasn't fully worked, but I'm trying. But then after he says this, Usopp says, he's so lucky, Zoro. Why can't I be dead like he is? And I don't remember a time where Usopp was horny, guys. And I may be really wrong on that. You may be able to point out several scenes for all I know. But I'm just saying, from where I'm sitting, I have often seen Usopp as the outside, the only one that doesn't really sort of display this out of the boys a lot of the time. And I don't know if I'm misremembering, giving him too much credit, I don't know. But, yeah, I felt come on, Usopp, you were supposed to be sort of my cinnamon roll pure boy. And I can't believe that you're co-signing this. Brooke, meanwhile, says, oh, but the water's getting so high, soon you will be dead like me. And Usopp says, well, then why don't you hurry up and do something about it, which is good advice. So then we get all of the talk with Jinbei, which I've already gone over, and then we jump over to the villagers. I don't even know if, is that what I should call them? I'm going to call them villagers. I'm sorry, Florian is in the chat and says, I think he needed a mouse, and he saw some? A mouse? That's got to be a typo, but I do not know what it could have been that you were trying to say. I'm so sorry. And then Florian says, yeah, that is a weird moment for Usopp, but maybe Usopp is doing a, quote, I wish I was dead meme. I would like to think that, but I don't feel like the timing makes sense. I think it is just Usopp co-signing being a little creep. Unfortunately. But anyway, okay, so... oh, muse. He needed a muse. Oh, Florian. Okay. That actually, when you frame it like that, what really is a muse, but just almost always a hot chick that makes you horny. That's just been what it's sort of short for, historically speaking, in media. I bet you're right. I didn't even think of that, framing it in that way. But it's so wild. You guys, think about this, that I was sort of you just wanted hot chicks to look at, and that inspires you somehow, and I was so dismissive of it. But then you rephrase it as he needed a muse, and all of a sudden I'm fully oh, I get it. That makes sense. we have really like fucked our heads up with just calling things by a slightly different name and trying to make it seem as if it's like somehow artistic or more noble, and then it's okay. When it comes down to it, it's the same garbage. And I mean, honestly, I feel sometimes like I'm taking crazy pills when I step back from my own brain and realize the way that I can sort of rationalize things. But anyway, this is the point where the villagers have been harassing, and I say harassing, but that's so unfair because it's the pirates that are harassing the villagers, but the villagers are beginning to really fight back, and they are about to kill them. They have like beaten the shit out of what do you call him? What's the name of the guy who's like the shark? The hammerhead shark. And so these villagers are about to kill him, and there's a real moment of like, you guys don't stand a chance against us. We're going to take them all out. And all of a sudden, here comes the prince, and he says, if you kill them, you're no better than they are. And we're going to take them into custody. Spare them their lives. You guys know my complicated feelings on this. It's the sort of thing that like the good guy almost always is required to say this sort of thing. And while I understand the like inclination to make the good guy have this point of view, I have very little patience for it in the midst of certain plot points. And so what I'm saying here is, my guy, your father is being held for execution. These people are all like fighting back very reasonably, in my opinion. And here you are coming in and acting like you're no better than they are. They will stab you in the back the instant they get the chance. There's not even like a maybe on that. And him trying to sort of, the whole idea to me of like, that makes you no better than them, I never buy that. There is a difference in why you want to take someone's life, and that, for me, makes a really, really big difference between you. You know, I think motivation counts for a lot. So there's that's true. Florian is pointing out, I feel like here it makes a little more sense because of their mother. You're correct. You know what? I take it back, because you're right. That is like the main point that she made is don't kill out of vengeance. And that is sort of what it seems like they're about to do. I would argue that it's not even vengeance. It's a preventative measure, especially considering in a lot of cases, taking somebody into custody, taking them hostage, whatever, is actually more difficult than just killing them. And so these dudes who were about to fight these pirates, they didn't have the princes right next to them when they started this whole thing. The princes are like, you know, sort of swoop in. So I don't blame them for just being like, let's just kill him. That'll make it easier. But yeah, the prince insists here and tells his brothers to manage it. I've really grown to like his brothers a lot. It's like one of those moments where the two of them are so weird looking that I sort of was anticipating, and I know that this is like sort of fucked up of me, but there it is. I was sort of anticipating that these guys were going to turn out to maybe be less awesome than their brother, that it was going to be a sort of you know, the hot one is the good guy, and then his like weird brothers are actually sort of corrupted, because that's a thing a lot when it's princesses. You've got like your main girl who's the pure-hearted, beautiful one, and then the two like other sisters who are less hot and also really mean and terrible. And I'm glad to be wrong. I knew that they were obviously the previous episodes where they support their sister in the midst of everything with their mother dying. That's like a huge moment that solidified that for me. But I just wanted to address that I was touched by that moment so much, partially because I had an expectation that I didn't even stop and think about, really. And I just kind of feel guilty about that and feel the need to address it. So, you know, all of our minds are poisoned, guys. What can I say? So, this is when the fucking hammerhead comes in. I thought it was previously, but no. He comes in to try and go up against Fukaboshi, is that the prince's name? Who is really disgusted that this guy is going to go up against other fishmen. He's just like, I already thought it was disgusting that you were willing to harm humans. But going after other fishmen, that is truly beyond the pale, and you should be fucking ashamed of yourself. I should mention, too, that Fukaboshi has it almost looks like a sort of mole in the center of his forehead. And I feel like that might be a marking that is, like, put on people in certain cultures. I know that there's, like, bindis, but I'm talking about an actual, almost like a scarring sort of effect. And I wasn't sure if that's what this is supposed to be or if it's something other. The way that the camera zooms in on his forehead and zooms in on that, like, marking for a moment, I was like, am I supposed to take the power of his attack or his defense in here really comes from that? I don't know. But regardless, yeah, our hammerhead dude comes after Fukaboshi and really thinks that he's going to handle this shit. And he swings down on him and it gets blocked to a degree that it's actually also an attack. And the next thing we know, my guy is all trussed up along with all of his cohorts. And this leads to a kind of wild, like, situation a little bit later on. But then we jump over to Hordy. And he's saying, like, one of his men is asking, do you think we need to have somebody stay here and guard them? And he says there's no need. There's nobody who can get through the gate. So all we need are people to be guarding the gate, and then, you know, we'll be all set. And you can't lock out the new king. I guess it makes sense that they can't have guards around them, and we have to give a reason why they wouldn't do that. But to me, the way that the palace works and the way that it seems that you can approach it from so many different angles because it's underwater, I do not feel like this makes sense, but maybe it does. I don't know. Neptune is trying to tell him, like, you're not going to be respected as a king if you try and rule through violence. And Hordy says, are those going to be your last words? I'd have gone for something stronger. And he says that, and then there's a sort of like animation of a silvery slash across a black background, which I will not lie, you guys, I thought that was Hordy killing King Neptune. I had a real moment of like, oh, because I'm sort of on the fence about whether King Neptune's getting executed. A part of me feels like, of course not. And then there's a part of me that feels as if the prince is being set up as such a competent ruler so that we can then get a like him coming into his birthright and us feeling as an audience confident that he is able to handle this. And I may just, I don't really want Neptune to die. I've grown to like him in a very short time. I don't know. I just sort of feel like an affection for him. So I don't really want that. And so when it seemed as if Hordy was like, oh, those are your last words, lame. And then it seemed like he just killed him. I was like, oh, wow, this has gone a different way than I expected. But it turns out that it's Hordy's like body, that animation is supposed to give us a visual of like the pain that he's feeling internally, which I always am fascinated by, this sort of like attempt to show a feeling via a visual medium only. And I think that there have been moments where I've experienced a type of pain where a light has seemed to flash behind my eyes, that sort of thing. So I actually really liked this once I understood what was going on. He like clutches his chest and he says that the scar is burning from where Zorro cut him, which I should mention that like it's quite well healed already. So I guess that's part of the, I don't know if that's like the drug that's healing him or if it's him being a fish man and he heals a lot faster because of that. I don't recall. But either way, he wants more of this drug and he takes like a handful of them. He's very sloppy with it too, you guys. I just want to say, like, he takes a handful and he doesn't even try and get all of the ones he picked up in his hand into his mouth. He just sort of opens his mouth and then drops them at random onto his own face. And whatever gets into his mouth, he's like, good enough. I was like, this feels like a pretty precious resource, my guy. I feel like you should be a little bit more careful with all of this, but whatever. Nobody asked me. So he gets pumped up here again. And fully, you guys, I am watching this feeling very smug about the fact that the more of this he takes, it's going to have an effect on him and he's going to possibly die from it. There's just, I don't feel a lot of doubt about where this is going, which made me very sheepish when things happen a little bit later. It doesn't quite happen here, but here, you know, he just gets pumped up again and, he's asked, like, what should we do with the Straw Hats? And he says, nothing. They're just humans. They'll drown if left alone. And the palace is secure, so no one will be able to rescue them regardless of who comes. Forget them. And I always laugh at this because the idea of just, like, it's like Dr. Evil when he's asked by his son, aren't you going to kill them yourself? Or at least, like, stay and watch them die? And he's like, why don't you just shoot them? No, I'm going to put them in an easily escapable situation involving an overly elaborate and exotic death. And then, well, you're not going to stay and watch it? And he says, no, I'm just going to leave and then assume everything went to plan. What? And his son just being like, here, I've got a gun. We can shoot him together. It'll be fun. And he's like trying to just like actually get a thing done. And that's sort of what I felt like here. It doesn't ring true. Because Hordy is so bloodthirsty and hates humans so much that, especially if these people are part of the group that took down Arlong, he would absolutely want to kill them himself and make a big thing of it. Like, there's just, I don't buy this at all. In terms of character movement, it doesn't make any sense. I understand the need for it, but I just gotta call it out here. So, let's see, when Brooke says, I think I found it, guys, a bright ray of hope. Those fishmen we were dealing with earlier have left, so the palace is completely empty. Or it would be if they hadn't left Papagoo behind. Now we just need to ask Papagoo to find the keys to get us out of the chains. And so Brooke has to go to Papagoo, and your boy isn't taking it well when Brooke appears. He really freaks out. Understandably, it's extremely creepy looking. And Brooke's trying to be cheery and be like, he keeps saying like, I've been looking for you and I found you at last. And when you don't know what it is that's coming at you, that sounds really, really threatening. I don't really blame Papagoo for like just kind of losing his mind. And he tries to run away and they have him like literally hitting every pillar in the face on his way out. And Brooke is like, find the keys. Wait, no, the sword. Go find the sword. Go away. I don't know what you're talking about. What if you just listen to me? Wait. And that is how that ends. So we have the fight between Luffy and Jinbei where they hit each other. They get interrupted by Robin, and then Sanji jumps into the whole mix because he wants to save Robin because she's going to be between them when they punch. But she manages to sort of step out of the way. And so both of them wind up punching each other and also Sanji. It's a really weird setup. That's all I'm saying about this. And this is when Jinbei finally fucking explains the whole thing about the dynamic with Luffy stepping in. And Sanji says, Hordy's going to take the whole island if we don't do something soon. And we have a lot of friends that live here. And, you know, he makes a very good argument. And basically, Jinbei is just like, oh, well, I'm still going to stop you. And Luffy, rightfully, is very angry and says, he said all of that cool stuff and you're still not going to let me go. He's right. He's right to be angry about this. So the two of them once again facing off. I'm realizing that I spent like 45 minutes talking about only the first of the 3 episodes, but honestly, I'm talking about more than what just happens in the first episode, so I feel like it's valid. So we have like a bunch of different confrontations between various pirates and the townsfolk. One of them, that really weird looking guy who I think is called Daruma, he chews through the walls of a factory and just makes it collapse. And he had asked for something to eat, and this guy brings him a lovely, what looks to be like one of those rolled cakes, a Swiss roll, I think those are called. I can't remember. I should know this, and like a cappuccino. And he just chucks the tray and says, I don't want some trendy cappuccino latte thing when I'm hungry. That junk's not real food. What in hell do I look like? And he then says, you're starting to look pretty tasty yourself. For a snack, I like fish bones and I like them big. Which did kind of make me go, okay, is he a fish man himself? Or is he just meant to be some other creature that's teamed up with them? Is he a cannibal, in other words, is what I'm asking, you know? But yeah, and he's just like, apparently can just move through what amounts to solid stone. Like he's swimming through it. It's very weird. And the fact that none of them have ever seen this before is part of what's making me go like, is he actually a regular fishman? Because this isn't something that we have seen before. So oh, here it is. Here's the thing with the hammerhead shark, because he is getting really depressed, about the situation that they are currently in. And I just want to read this because it was a little confusing for me. Your plan isn't going to work. Boss Hordy would rather you cut us down son than negotiate. He's more ruthless than other fishman pirates. It's why he looks down son on the rest of us. And the other guys sitting around him are like, man, he's completely like lost all of his ability to go on since being captured. And one of them says his power level has dropped to down son, which I was like, that's weird. You're just imitating his manner of speech. So he says, let me give him an energy steroid. And they have it on them. And despite being like tied up, they're able to spit one into his mouth somehow. So he's sitting there and he's still kind of talking about Hordy makes me frown, son. And as he's saying this, his veins begin bulging out. Hordy doesn't like fishermen who do business with human pirates. He'll give them the bumpson without mercy. And somebody says bumpson, and I could not stop laughing. You guys, normally these people's weird vocal tics go completely unacknowledged within the episode. So when somebody is like, what did he just say? I think that is hilarious. All those fishmen who donated their blood to help out wounded humans, he gave them the old wumpson in the dark of night. Wumpson? Hordy believes that human blood is naturally tainted, and whenever we receive their blood or offer them our own, we do son our pure blood a disservice. He's back to saying do son now. So it's like is wild. This guy's eyes start glowing red, and he is able to fully burst out of the chains that he is wrapped up in, which that's quite a bit of power up from this one pill. It makes a little bit of sense why Hordy is able to do some truly bonkers shit later. But yeah, he becomes lethal again with his giant weird hammer, and he's like, all right, men, I freed you all, and now we're going to the execution. I'm going to kind of speed through a lot of the rest of this particular episode because it's mostly us seeing all of the different like prime henchmen of Hordy and the way that they're rounding up or dealing with the townsfolk. So we have our guy who's drunk all the time, and they basically try and say he's too drunk to fight, and he proves them wrong by slicing a bunch of dudes down, which they're then like, why don't we just bring him somewhere where enemies are? And so he can just flail at everybody around him and actually hit enemies. Then we have a particularly funny one with the chameleon guy where the townsfolk are like trying to fight him, but they can't see him, and they're getting really frustrated because this is a very, very unfair fight. And then they see a cockroach and somebody's like, quick, kill it. In the midst of this fight, that's their concern, which I thought was honestly valid. I hate cockroaches so much. And they stomp the shit out of it and continue waiting for the attack from this guy. And then nothing happens, and it takes them a minute before they're like, wait, what? And he comes back into view because he just somehow was on the ground under where they stomped to get the cockroach, so they inadvertently stomped the shit out of his face, which made me LOL, because that is the dumbest joke. Like, that doesn't, there's no sense in it. I don't care. It was very, very funny and very unexpected. I did not see that coming. So this is when we have the princes talking about the Straw Hats and how, you know, I am going to keep them from murdering our father, and I'm going to stop the townsfolk from having their hearts and minds turned from everything that we have worked for. And they admit that there are some things that make sense now that they probably should have investigated a lot sooner, that probably were due to Hordy's influence. And I did like this conversation. All of them just sort of like stepping back and being like, probably we should have seen this coming a little bit more. That doesn't happen very often in this show. People being like, all right, you know what? I copped to it. I really made some mistakes and should have predicted some of this was going to go down. So eventually we have the guy with 8 arms that they're gesturing with fire near him, and he freaks out because he thinks they're trying to fry him like calamari and serve him with sake, and his guys are like, what do you even mean? Of course that's not what we're trying to do. He's extremely paranoid and sensitive. Then we have the arrival in the plaza of Hordy, and all of his like men below him are sort of worried because they can see that he is beginning to sweat and collapse, like he is not doing well. And the king realizes what's going on, and he's like, this is taking your life force, dude. And Hordy just tells him to shut up. And his own men are like, dude, you're really pushing yourself way too hard. You gotta stop and take a rest. We've basically won already. We've got the king. We've got this whole place sewn up. You just sit back and let us take care of the rest of these things. And he doesn't want to do that. He's like curled up saying he's going to, like, that he can't breathe. And eventually he's just like, I want more of it. And he takes, I think, almost all of it that they have left. And it's just like, as he begins to take it and the transformation is happening, one of the guys is thinking what I am thinking. He's about to like die, or something is going to happen to sort of like take him down for a little while. I was so deeply wrong. I really thought this was going to go the same way as Moria. And I think ultimately it will. But what happens in the meantime, they use this wild, like, reddish sort of thing around the figures that take this pill. But his eyes also go bright red, and he changes color entirely so that his hair is white as well. And he just overall has a way creepier look to him. And his men are just like, something's wrong. And he starts smiling and is just like, no, nothing's wrong. I feel better than I've ever felt. And he manages to literally like snap a finger and bring down the whole, like all of the buildings in this surrounding area. He also looks like he's grown in height, but I can't tell if that's just supposed to be the angle we're looking at him from, or if he is. He looks bigger to me. That's true, right? So then we go into the final episode, and again, the like argument between Luffy and Jinbei is still happening while Hordy is over here turning into a fucking maniac. And we have all of these different animals attacking the underwater animals. For me, this was sort of like, this wasn't as interesting as a lot of the other things that were going on. And I don't feel like I need to go over it because they're all beaten by the princes ultimately. The one thing I do want to touch on is Vanderdecken, who is crying over he's crying as if there was a breakup, but they never were together. So he's just really crying at the rejection of the princess, saying that he is not her type. And is saying, like, my heart is broken. You guys don't know what I've been going through. And he says, I loved her from the moment I saw her. Sure, she was just a kid. Ew. But I knew if I married her, I could fulfill my ancestors' dream. They've really made this guy so extra creepy. And he comes to the conclusion that if I can't have her and I can't kill her, I am going to kill everyone else, which truly doesn't make sense. But also, there are plenty of guys out there who would react this way to rejection. So I can't even fault it because men are insane. So, you know, dudes being rejected has resulted in the murder of many other people who were not involved in the past. And that's just real life, unfortunately. So it's weird because Vanderdecken's really not part of like the takeover. He is just solely here for the princess and doesn't seem to be at all interested in what's going on with Fishman Island. And so we really only go back to him very, very occasionally. We have one dude who's like one of the last soldiers available, and he's got some sort of explosive on him that he's going to try and do a suicide bomb. And he's spotted, and he's a little too far for most of them to do anything. But then Hordy sees him, and he does a technique water shot. And when he sends it, it goes right through the guy. It's not even like a bullet. It's more like a torpedo, because it goes through the guy, through the like cliff behind him, through several trees behind him, hits another cliff and goes through that. And this is all happening as the man is still falling. So it's also traveling at an incredible rate of speed. And it finally comes to a stop like 6 cliff sides later. And I love that one of the, I think it's one of the pirates is like, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't water shot supposed to be not that strong? It like keeps going through so many cliff sides that it eventually ends up on the side of the island with a bunch of mermaids who don't even know what it is, and they hear it and they're just sort of like, what is that? And then it just drops back into the ocean, which is actually a really cool way to end it, that it's not a bullet that lands anywhere. It literally travels so far that it just ends up in the ocean on the other side. But yeah, this is a really incredible level up on his ability. Like, what do you even do? I know that Luffy can withstand bullets, but there's something about this that I'm like, would that even work with this guy, you know? And then we also have like the bubbles that are like sort of a weak point. So I don't know how they're... There's the confrontation between the prince and Hordy, and, you know, the prince makes this, like, impassioned speech about giving humans a chance and trying to, like, change the future and not just continue doing the same shit we've always done. And Hordy just basically is like, give me a fucking break, you guys. This is so pitiful. You're thinking that you're being kind, but you're being an idiot. They have shown us time and time again what they're really made of. And when they beat the sea monsters, he's also like, that's really not a big deal. You think you did that this makes you badass all of a sudden? And we see all of his guys behind him starting to take these pills as well. And then immediately launch from their place, except for the one drunk guy. He does eventually, but he's always last, which I think is a nice touch. And all they have to do to these princes, they don't even need to kill them. All they need to do is just pop the bubble that is supporting them and their movement through the air. And they just go down. Which, what a weak point. That is really... I mean, that's a pretty huge Achilles heel, you guys. Like, I didn't even consider how this is our main attack. And, I mean, I feel like we should have come up with a better way of doing all of this by now then. But it is what it is, I suppose. Yikes, though. So that's the end of the episodes, but I like these three. There's a lot going on, and there's some interesting, like, questions that you can argue over. I'm always a fan of that. I just, also, I was taken so off guard by Hordy just turning into a fucking mutant Hulk. So, alright guys, I'm going to wrap this up, but thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Michael, also for commissioning this. Thank you, Florian, for coming into the chat and chatting with me and giving me some good things to think about with some of my hang-ups on this episode. I appreciate you. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.